us today, I have Dr. Michelle Ferrell. She runs a private practice over in Germany. And so she's joining us. It's a little bit later there where she's at. So good evening, Dr. Ferrell. And if you could just kind of start by introducing yourself and telling us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Absolutely. Good evening. Thank you for having me. My name is Dr. Michelle Ferrell. I am a fairly recent licensed psychologist. Um, I was licensed as a psychologist a couple of years ago now, so still fairly new to the field of psychology in some ways.
Yeah.
Currently, I work in Germany. I'm a military spouse, so the military brought us over to Germany. And for anyone who has been affiliated with the military, they can tell you that spouses oftentimes have a challenge with finding jobs and positions that can suit them, especially overseas. And so fortunately, and I can talk a little more about this later if you would like, but fortunately I was able to connect with some English-speaking counselors here who are running some private practices, and I got mentored in how to do that. And I started really not that long ago, March of 2021. And since then, the practice has really grown. I do primarily telehealth, but also have a partnership with a church in the area where I can see people in person as well. And I work with a variety of people, but my main focus is English-speaking expats who live in Germany and in the surrounding areas. And so that can look like military families, even missionaries, and also people who just come here for work, for their business. And I work with children, teens. Teens are probably my favorite.
Okay.
Adults, couples, and do some parent training as well. So quite the variety.
Yeah. Neat. Yeah, I would love to, I want to get into all of that. I think first, can you tell us I want to hear a little bit about your journey. So maybe start with where your interest in psychology first began and what led you to a graduate school program.
That's a good question. As you may have heard from other people who get into the field of psychology, there can be a general sense of, I want to help people, but not really sure what that means or what that looks like. And you kind of want to save the world, but you don't really know. So I think part of that was there for me starting out. Growing up, I had the opportunity to have an adopted brother who has several different diagnoses, including autism, along with some others. And they were adopted internationally. And so from a young age, I had an awareness that there were needs all over the world for mental health services. And so I had a desire to support communities that were underserved, under-resourced, especially internationally from that. When I was an undergrad, I was able to study psychology, mainly because it seemed fun to me. And I was able to work with a psychologist who went overseas and did trainings with clinicians in Kazakhstan specifically. And that experience of being mentored by that psychologist showed me how much I didn't know and how much I had to learn. And so really that's what led me into looking into a graduate degree, because I knew I had a lot more to learn. And I really like the idea of being able to train and support others in their communities, as opposed to being the one to always provide the services, but how can I come alongside communities with their unique strengths and culture and background and needs, and support the systems that are already in place so that they can have the resources they need to thrive, what that looks like for them. So, when I was in graduate school, I wasn't quite sure how all of that would turn out. This desire to work overseas, somehow reach communities that were underserved. Um, and because I didn't know anyone who was really doing that at
Mm.
that time. So through that process, I was able to have the opportunity to get a really good foundation of psychology, individual counseling. I had a year where I was working with children,
Mm.
and that was a whole thing. For anyone who's worked with children, you probably know that you almost have to redefine what therapy looks like,
Mm.
because it's less words and more play and more connection. And so that sort of shift in getting that training was really helpful for me. And um, after several years in graduate school, uh, getting that foundation, I was able to, after I graduated and after internship, find a postdoctoral fellowship that was really focused on working with children and families. And that kind of set me on a path that I am now, gave me that chance to work more with the population that I found I really care about.
Mm. When is it that you realized you wanted to work with children or adolescents?
Mm. I think probably halfway through my postdoctoral fellowship.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So it was a little bit of a, I don't know, walk by faith journey of, all right, what are the opportunities that are given to me, and how can I be open to those, and what am I truly interested in?
Oh,
The first year I worked with children when I was in graduate school, that was my third year of graduate school.
okay.
It was pretty stressful. I think I had a lot on my plate. And at the end of that, I thought, I don't know, this is pretty hard.
Mm.
But based on where my husband was stationed for our postdoc, he's also a psychologist.
Oh, okay.
So we navigated internship. We both went on internship at the same time.
Uh-huh.
And then for postdoc fellowship, I wanted to find a place that was near where he was stationed.
Mm.
And the fellowship that I was able to get with children was right in the town where he worked.
Oh, neat.
And after some time of working with children and getting adjusted to that job, and before that, I had done some college counseling too, so it was a little bit of an adjustment.
Mm.
But I started to see the power in really strengthening and healing bonds between children and caregivers,
Mm.
whether those caregivers were their biological parents, adopted parents, foster parents, grandparents, whatever the role was. And I really saw this lasting impact
Mm.
where it went a lot farther than my 1 hour a week with
Mm.
this family, because it was the family making changes and building connections
Uh-huh.
throughout their day and daily life. And that's where I saw, oh, this is exciting.
Mm.
This is what I want to do. And
Uh-huh.
so that's probably when I decided that.
Okay. Did your husband, did he go through like the HPSP program, or was he already yeah. Did he, so in college you can join like kind of the military through your training and then they'll help pay for it. Did he do something like that, or was he already, did you meet him and he was an Army psychologist already?
That's a good question. When I met him, we were in the same not internship cohort, the same graduate cohort
Okay.
together. There were, I think, around 14 of us, give or
Uh-huh.
take. And at that time, he was in the application process for the HPSB
Okay.
scholarship. So I think once we started dating, which was the end of our second year in graduate school, I think he had accepted that scholarship and
Mm.
was on the path to become an Army psychologist.
Okay. And then, and you were able to get, so me and my wife, we were looking into that, and she was going to apply. We could still do the 1 year scholarship, but we were thinking, I wonder how that would work with both of us going on internship and then having where you get stationed. So it sounds like it worked out pretty well for you too.
It did for us. I will say it doesn't for everybody
Okay.
for a relationship year. And I know other couples that had to be more long distance during that time.
Mm.
And I think, regardless of the situation, there can be challenges with it.
Yeah.
what we ended up doing is I chose to apply for college counseling internships because there's so many of them.
Uh,
They give me flexibility, and I like the population as well. Uh, and that gave me the ability to rank highly where I went for internship, which was only an hour away from where my husband got matched. And so
okay.
we lived in the middle and both did a bit of a commute.
Yeah.
So so we finagled it a little bit,
Yeah.
but um, yeah, there are options with it, definitely, but it can be a little complicated sometimes.
Well, good. I'm glad it worked out so well for you guys. And did he serve for a few years in the States, and then you guys ended up in Germany?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so with his program, and I hope I'm not giving you wrong information. The military is so complicated.
Yeah, that's okay.
So many acronyms. So I'm still learning. But he completed his training, his internship, and postdoc at a training facility. One of the, I think there's four for the Army now
Hmm.
for psychologists, and then Germany was his first duty stationed duty
Oh,
station training.
okay. What did you think of that?
So I think for me, just based on my background, and I've always had a little bit of a glamorized view of living overseas.
Uh-huh.
So for me, where we were in our life, it was exciting, an
Hmm.
adventure, but there definitely was a question of what does this mean for me
Hmm.
as a
Yeah.
psychologist?
Yeah.
And I really had to think about that and, let go of my, I guess, the formula I had in my mind of what psychologists should do
Hmm.
graduating, and again that definition of what a successful psychologist even is,
Uh-huh.
and it's been amazing. I think when I let go of that and was open to whatever the experience was,
Hmm.
it's given me the opportunity to learn how to be a psychologist in a different way,
Hmm.
grow in so many ways, and also how to be more of who I want to be as a human too.
What was what was your maybe preconceived notion of what a psychologist has to be that doesn't fit where you are now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I had the idea that as a psychologist, you should do an internship, do a
Hmm.
postdoc,
Hmm.
maybe get hired on wherever that is,
Hmm.
uh, and just keep that consistency, always
Uh-huh.
be working, and doing the next thing. And, moving to Germany with
Hmm.
jobs being different, I ended up not working for, gosh, maybe 7 months or so,
Okay.
which was probably the longest I hadn't worked since I started graduate school or maybe before.
Yeah.
So for me, I think that was a really good time to have a little more space.
Hmm.
Um, and I don't know about you, but I think for a lot of graduate students, there's so much you have to do and so much you have to keep track of that sometimes you don't have a chance to reflect on who you want to be
Hmm.
and what you even want to do. So for me, having that time was really helpful.
Hmm.
And I think it equipped me to start a private practice here in Germany and be able to make it look how I wanted it to and what suited me. And it's worked out pretty well. It's been a blessing.
I'm good. I um you know how you can be a civilian contractor on a military base, and sometimes I believe, I might be wrong, but I think that they hire civilian psychologists to be contracted. Is that something that you ever looked into? Is that not, maybe not common, but is it likely that you could get a position like that? Because that was always I was in the military and I got out with the notion that I was going to go to grad school and then just become a civilian contractor on a military base. So maybe you can burst my bubble, or yeah, what's the likelihood of that?
I think it's very likely. I
Okay.
think it would depend where you are in the
Uh-huh.
world.
Uh-huh.
Um, I I know other psychologists, including myself, who had some challenges with finding a contractor or a GS position over here.
Yeah.
Um, but a lot of that was more related to it being a pandemic and
Mm.
everything looking a little bit different.
Hmm.
And so, I think it might not be as guaranteed when you're overseas. You might have to get creative, but especially, a lot of people can request veterans preference or military spouse preference if it's a
Mm.
position that you're really interested in. And that can open a lot of doors for you.
Okay.
So I definitely think it's an option.
Yeah. Okay. That's cool. What is, tell us a little bit about your thought process, and how you said you got some connections when you started up your private practice. Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. So I was actually on my graduate school's alumni page, I believe,
Okay.
Facebook page at some point, and I saw a licensed counselor post on there. If anyone's looking for a job in Germany, I'm looking to have people join my team.
Oh,
And I thought,
wow.
all right. So I reached out to her, and I lived about 3 hours away from her. So for me, I thought, well, I'll just see what her experience is, see
Yeah.
if I can learn something. And through conversations with her, I learned about a type of practice here in Germany that I don't remember the German word. I wish I did.
Mm.
But it's basically a variety of independent practitioners, but who work together as a team and as a community to
Oh,
provide
okay.
support for one another.
Oh.
And she gave me the opportunity of joining on is that to have my own private practice, but then also support from a community of other practitioners. And I think that component was incredibly important for me
Mm.
in terms of pure consultation,
Mm.
uh, logistic support, how to make sure you didn't upset the German government by doing your taxes wrong, things like that.
Yeah.
And I think that really helped me be set up for success. So was able to start that partnership
Mm.
and get a lot of referrals through that community starting out. And it really got me on my feet. It's still a great encouragement to me.
Yeah, what a neat program. I imagine that starting a private practice in Germany, um, yeah, I don't even know what that would entail with the government and with taxes, and um, I'm surprised that they allow non-citizens to start private practice over there.
Yeah, you really have to know the regulations and the
Hmm.
rules. So it was a little overwhelming for me at
Hmm.
first. I was thankful I had people who had done it before me,
Yeah.
because there's, in the United States, we have our way of being trained as psychologists.
Yeah.
But in Germany, it's very different. Psychologists are trained in a very different way.
Mm.
Oftentimes, instead of being trained as a generalist, they're trained in a specific modality, such as Adlerian therapy or psychodynamic therapy, and
Huh.
that's their thing. And so, even sometimes the language that is used around psychology, around diagnoses, even is different.
Mm.
And so, for me, as not a German citizen, but fortunately here on kind of a military visa, this
Uh-huh.
SOFA status is what it's called, I had the ability to work as a freelancer and provide counseling services. So you have to learn the language. And
Yeah.
in Germany, I don't call myself a psychologist because that means something different. It means that
Mm.
you've been trained in the German system.
Yeah.
But I can provide psychological counseling and offer services in that way. And so
Okay.
that's how I learned through the mentorship of many others to start to serve people here.
Yeah. And how did you get into connection with the church that you work with?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I started, once I started working with a community here in Germany, I just realized that for people who are expats, who speak English, but are in Germany, but Germany's not their native land,
Mm.
native home, a lot of times those people fell through the cracks. And I understood with the military system, oftentimes active duty members and maybe their families would be checked on. But then for contractors
Mm.
or others who were here in Germany, oftentimes there were not many resources
Mhm.
for them. And so I started to reach out to churches near a local Air Force base
Oh.
just to see.
Yeah.
'Cause I thought, if I'm already seeing so much need with my little private practice, I wonder what it's like for churches.
Hmm.
I wonder if they could use some more support. And one church in particular was really receptive. I had several meetings with the pastors. We talked through what this partnership could look like.
Hmm.
I was able to go to their church and meet everyone, go up on stage,
Oh,
uh,
wow.
and after that, I was able to create a partnership with them where I provide counseling services for members of that church, and also use their facilities, which gave me a good chance to see some people in person, which
Yeah,
was
good.
always nice.
Much needed. Is is the primary reason that you mainly use telehealth with your private practice because of the pandemic, and then once it's over, if that ever happens, you'll be able to see people in person?
That was the original reason I got started with telehealth.
Uh-huh.
Also, just starting out from a business standpoint, thinking about the
Mm.
investment starting out of how much money you want to put into a business and how to plan financially. I thought telehealth was a good financial decision
Mm.
uh, because then I don't have to rent a business or anything like that.
Yeah.
And the more I've done it, the regulations in Germany are a little bit different. In the United States, you typically have to be licensed in the state that you're seeing clients
Mm.
at.
Uh-huh.
In Germany, you can see anyone in Germany, really anyone in Europe.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
mhm. Yep, you just have to be aware of your liability insurance, make sure it covers where that person is, and make sure there's a good plan in place for wherever they're located. So it works a little differently. So being able to do telehealth services has given me the chance to see people, gosh, all over Germany, even into a couple other European countries. And I haven't mentioned this before, it gave me a chance to partner with a couple mission organizations
Oh,
who wanted another psychologist to refer to when their missionaries needed a little more support. And so that gave me a chance to see people in the Middle East and in areas in South America as well. And you have to look at the country's regulations, but
yeah.
learning how to be a psychologist internationally is quite the learning curve as well, and a lot of fun.
Yeah. That's so neat. There's a few of us here, in my cohort and the cohort above us that really kind of have a passion, like you yourself said, of going overseas one day. And some of us, there's one lady who is on internship now. She wants to go to Thailand, um, and so we're all kind of toying with how we can make that happen. So what you're saying is in a lot of ways it gives hope, and it's thrilling to hear you talk about being able to partner with missions and to talk with people all over, because are you familiar with member care?
Mhm.
That's a route that me and my wife are considering. So yeah, so that's just what a neat opportunity that you have. That's really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And if your fellow classmate and colleague wants any more information about working in Thailand, I know a counseling center in Thailand that would
Of
probably
course you do.
so. So that it's just amazing to be able to build connections with people
Yeah.
all over the world, and there's so much to think about. Even from oh, if you think about a multicultural perspective. When
Mm.
I first started working here in Germany, and I was working with people from all different cultures, I was like, gosh, okay, how does them with their cultural background intersect with them living in Germany, speaking English, and me with my cultural background? And I went back to some of my multicultural books
Mm.
from graduate school, which I think very highly of, but a
Uh,
lot of them were really centered in the United States and what it's
mm.
like for marginalized communities to live in the United States. And I was like, well, I'm not in the United States, so what does that mean? How do I? So it's
Mm.
been another thing that's been really wonderful to learn about and also humbling as well.
Yeah, I bet. Do you have do you through your research, do you have any good resources to recommend for someone who is looking into how culture plays an impact, but not here in America?
Hmm. There's a book called Third Culture Kids. I don't remember the
Okay.
author. I have to get it to you
Uh,
later.
yeah.
And that's a pretty good resource. But a
Okay.
lot of times I go back to some of the foundational listening and cultural humility skills I
Yeah.
learned in graduate school of like, okay, so how do I ask with curiosity? What is it like for you
Hmm.
with your background and how you see the world? And how's that different from how your parents see the world?
Hmm.
And how about the people around you? And asking those questions and really learning different people's stories. And
Yeah.
I think that's probably the main thing I
Yeah.
find myself in.
So neat. You should write a book on it. um,
I'm considering it. We'll see.
okay. What is your theoretical orientation?
That's a great question. Um, I would say my theoretical orientation is mostly attachment based, attachment theory,
Okay.
and I think that fits really well with kind of my favorite work to do, which is with children and teens with some
Hmm.
sort of attachment wound or
Hmm.
issue related to early childhood attachment. So a lot of my clients have been adopted or gone through foster care and that sort of thing. And so for me, understanding about attachment and how to build healthy attachment, repair it, and strengthen it has been really relevant for working with this family. So I think that's what I find myself falling back on most
Yeah.
often.
Okay. How is it for you working with um, children and adolescents over telehealth, like Zoom? Kind of, is it, do you see it as kind of a barrier in some sense, or is it just as, can you, readily play games and build a secure attachment and good relationship with them just as you could in person, do you think?
Uh, that's a good question.
Mm.
I think it really depends on the child and their
Uh-huh.
age. What I have found is that for younger children, so under 8 years old,
Yeah.
uh, for me personally, it's pretty challenging. I know a lot of therapists who do it
Mm.
and have a lot of creative methods, screen sharing, games,
Mm.
whiteboard activity, to activities where they stand up and move a lot. Um, and and so there are ways to do it. But for me personally,
Yeah.
around age 9 or so, um, and older, when a child can sit and engage with me, it
Mm.
seems to be working best. But it takes a lot of creativity. I have a couple HIPAA compliant video platforms that have a lot of games on them and
Okay.
a whiteboard, and I rely heavily on that for more interaction. And
Mm.
I seem to really like it.
Okay. Would you mind the HIPAA compliant with the games and stuff on there? Is that something available to people in the United States as well?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yes, the main one I use with younger children is called Hopscotch.
Okay.
It's right now a free app that's created by therapists. I think it was created during the pandemic because they realized they needed a more kid-friendly platform.
Yeah.
And I recently did a presentation for a missionary organization about doing telehealth with children. So if you want any resources for that, I can also pass on the PowerPoint.
That would be great.
A lot of it is having really good games up your sleeve and finding out what they're interested in and
Mm.
using that, whether it's Legos or Minecraft or superheroes or art, and building off of that.
Yeah. You mentioned, you do couples therapy even. Are there certain types of cases that you only began seeing once you started the private practice, or did you have some experience with couples during grad school, stuff like that? Yeah.
I had a little bit of experience with couples in grad school.
Oh,
I think in my second year, I did some work with a few couples, and then on internship as well, I was able to learn a lot about emotion focused therapy for
okay.
couples, um, and be mentored by some older and wiser therapists who utilized that, which I was thankful for.
Mm.
Um, but I was planning on avoiding working with couples initially because it's hard. Working with couples is hard. Uh, because there's two humans involved, and
Mm.
usually things that are very deeply personal,
Mm.
and sometimes a lot of hurt. And so I initially wasn't going to see couples, but I think with the pandemic and just with life stress as well,
Mm.
what I've seen is for a lot of couples, at least living overseas, it's not that there are new issues necessarily, but it's that the issues have been intensified
Mm.
because the stress is higher, the time together might be higher, and so things might escalate a little
Mm.
bit more. So I really started seeing couples more because people kept asking me to. And so before I started seeing couples, I went back to some training and went through Gottman training
Uh,
to learn about Gottman couple therapy. And I'm still getting consultation on working with couples to
yeah.
make sure I'm working within my scope there. And I fortunately have had some good experiences with couples because that's an attachment dynamic as well. And
Yeah.
so helping to be a part of that healing can be really powerful.
Yeah. I wonder, you mentioned with the pandemic, I wonder how much of that has helped in some ways, certain couples, maybe help them to slow down and reconnect with one another, because maybe whereas before they were both up and about and their schedules were always conflicting, I wonder if for some people if it was helpful that they had to kind of slow down and be together again, you know?
Yeah.
I don't know. Um, that was just a thought that I had, but um, with so with couples, teenagers, um, adolescents, what is it that you said your favorite work is with adolescents? Um, is there like a, I don't know, can you share maybe a small story of like a nice kind of a breakthrough client that you've had recently, or some type of some work that you thought just went really well?
Sure. Let me think for a moment.
Okay.
Let's see. Oh, I think the reason why I like working with adolescents
Uh-huh.
so much is because it can be really hopeful. Um, that season can be a really, really hard season.
Mm.
And then on top of just that being a hard stage of life for many people, to then potentially have a mental health diagnosis or to have early life trauma on top
Mm.
of that can really amplify challenges and make it very difficult. And so, um, being able to be a support for adolescents
Mm.
and young adults too, and give them space to be without expectations.
Mm.
I think what I see is that a lot of clients really desire that.
Mm.
And that in of itself can be healing and supportive. And I think that's a really important foundation because I
Yeah.
think many clients of that age range, if they don't trust you, they're going to make it clear. Sometimes with adults, they can power through, or that they may be taking a bigger role in their own healing journey. But with teens and children, that relationship is most important.
Mm.
And so I would say I'm thinking of one client I have had recently who she just acknowledged to me, "Oh, thank you for letting me say all my emotions here, and that
Mm.
all emotions are okay." And I reinforced that
Yeah.
yes, if we don't face our emotions, we don't know how to deal with them because we're trying to suppress or ignore, or they're overwhelming us.
Mm.
And so even just that little thing, being able to have that space to name what you're feeling, can go a long way.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you make a great point. I was reading just last night about safety being kind of the very most important thing, and that if your client doesn't feel safe, then they're gonna have defenses up, and if their defenses are up, then they're not gonna be able to um, work on what they're defending against. So um, yeah, safety is like the primary importance, and I think a lot of times it goes overlooked in some cases. Yeah. Um, and I talked with you a little bit before we started about being, a new psychologist and going through grad school and starting a private practice, and then also being maybe considering starting a family. Um, have you where are you guys at, if I can ask, in starting a family, or do you plan on doing so in the future? Or
Mhm,
yeah,
mhm. Yeah, yeah, you definitely can ask. Yeah, I think so far with what life has given us, we've paused that part
mm,
of growing our family
yeah,
um, to go through some of these milestones while we had the opportunity.
mm,
Um, and I knew for me personally, and my husband really supported me with this, that I especially needed to finish my dissertation, because if we started to have children and I had that dissertation, I don't know if it would have ever gotten. Well, that's just me, because
yeah,
I I'm not that type of psychologist that loves that type of research. So I needed some extra support and space to do that.
uh-huh,
Um, but moving to Germany, having an overseas move, um, and then knowing that we'll be moving back to the States,
mm,
and not too long, in the next year or two.
mm,
Um, you never fully know when that will be, but even though we think we might, that things can always change. I think we're learning a balance of, maybe there's never a perfect time,
mm,
and also, what makes sense based on what season of life we're in. And when I was thinking about a job here in Germany, and I was thinking about a GS position or government contracting
mm,
position, um, I was also thinking about flexibility for
uh-huh,
me, and wanting to ensure that I had the ability to step back if I needed to, slow down if I needed to, or figure out what a new balance would look like. And
mm,
so being able to start a private practice has given me a bit more agency over that,
mm,
and also a little bit more opportunity to travel while we're
good.
here, which is important for us.
Yeah.
So I think our hope is, and you can never fully plan on these things, but in the next couple of years, but we'll see what happens. We're very open to it.
Okay, good. Yeah. You mentioned in a year or so moving back to the States. With this turn of events and having a private practice and working with a church, and where do you see yourself moving to once you come back to the States, and what kind of practice do you see yourself getting into?
That's a good question. I think before I started this practice, my thoughts were very much like, okay, where can we find me a good job working
Mm,
with children at a hospital or some sort of outpatient clinic or something like that.
yeah,
Since starting this private practice, and just seeing how many opportunities there are to make the practice of psychology work for
mm,
you, um, I think I'm a lot more flexible about where we end up.
mm,
Um, I could see myself in some way continuing some sort of private practice with an international focus,
uh-huh,
possibly shifting more to member care, um, or possibly shifting more to even a testing practice a little bit. That's one
mm,
part of psychology I miss doing,
uh-huh,
and this sort of work. And I love counseling, and I quite like telehealth counseling as well, but I'm missing assessment a little bit, which I never thought I would say. So, I'm really open to a couple different options. It might depend on if we have kids or not as well, but
yeah,
I think that's a good place to be, especially as a military spouse, because we don't quite know where we'll be in the States yet.
Yeah. Yeah. Just kind of an open curiosity and flexibility. Yeah. Does your husband plan on continuing service? Is he liking it so far?
Yeah, for now he does.
Yeah.
I think his main question is also, what does work-life balance look like?
Uh-huh.
And so I think that's an ongoing conversation that we have. And I think the more he works within the military and works in different units at different duty stations too, it gives him more information about um, what fits for him and what fits for us, and um, if we have children, what's going to fit for the whole family as
Yeah.
well. So I would say, again, openness and a lot of ongoing conversations about
Yeah.
that.
You mentioned travel earlier. Have you guys gone to, like, I don't know, Freud's estate or museum or anything like that over there?
We haven't yet. I'm hoping that we can make it to that area, and hopefully to Vienna and things like that. We haven't made it quite that far. What's that east? That far east yet, but we'll probably end up doing a little bit of that. Not too much. We keep work and vacation separate.
Uh-huh. Okay, I see.
Yeah, but with this pandemic, now every country handles it differently, and so for Germany and Europe in general, there have been a lot of restrictions and a lot of times where we haven't been able to travel. And so,
Mm.
anytime that we do get to, for example, over the summer, things open up a little bit more. We've been very grateful for it, and we've had a chance to see some pretty cool places. My favorite so far has probably been Italy. We got to go to Rome.
Oh, nice. Good. Good. Um, is there kind of my last question? Are there any authors or maybe who has been kind of influential in your studies or in your work?
Hmm. Oh, that's a good question. So many. Um, Probably Sue Johnson with emotion focused therapy. The book Hold Me Tight really changed the way I understood couples therapy, and it really helped me understand attachment in general. And it's a pretty nice read too, not super academic, which is my favorite. I
Yeah,
like
good.
things that are kind of fun to read, and there's a lot of case studies in that. So I think that one. Another one, let's see if I have it here. Oh, I think I do. Um, and I am not, I don't get any sort of compensation for advocating books. But one type of therapy that has been really helpful for me and that I've learned a bit about is more attachment focused therapy for children with trauma. And so the author, Paris Goodyear Brown, um, she's written several books about children with trauma from an attachment focused lens. One of her most recent books is, I have it right here, it's called Parents, it's probably like backwards for you, but it's Parents as Partners in Child Therapy. And
Okay.
it's been very helpful for me in learning how to incorporate the parents more,
Mm.
be a team with them.
Mm. Man, that sounds really useful. I just recently um, took part in a trauma focused CBT kind of course online. And one of the things that they do in TFCBT is incorporate the parent throughout. And if they teach the child, like let's say diaphragmatic breathing, for instance, then they'll have the child teach the parent. And so then it's kind of incorporating the parent in the sessions, and it's building kind of the bond between child and parent. So that was kind of my first introduction to working with like child therapy, um, and then introducing the idea of bringing in the parents. Um, so I actually I'm not. I just started seeing my first children clients this a couple months ago. So any words of wisdom on how to incorporate parents that you found useful or that you kind of go to when working with children and adolescents?
Yeah. I think one of the most helpful things for me to learn is setting up expectations that the parents are going to be involved at the beginning.
Okay.
I definitely had families where the parents kind of give me the child and
Mm.
then um, and I think it's partly based on just how counseling and psychology can be portrayed in
Uh-huh.
the media too.
Uh-huh.
It's very kind of individual focused. And so I've learned from the beginning to set up with the parent and emphasize you are the expert on your child.
Mm.
You understand your family system. And I'm only with this child maybe an hour a week,
Mm.
while you are a lot more than that. So I want to support you and learn from you. And let's talk about what role you can have in
Mm.
this. So for a lot of parents, that looks like a check-in at the beginning, sometimes joint parent and child sessions throughout as well, depending on the child's needs,
Yeah.
and just keeping that really open communication with the parent, with a lot of respect and learning from their perspective. So
Mm.
I think that's been one of the most valuable things for me.
Okay, that's helpful. All right. All right. Dr. Farrell, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. It's been a lot of fun. Thank you for sharing your experience with us, and um, thanks for taking the time to join us.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. It's been very enjoyable to share about my story and to get to know you as well.
Oh, thank you.